Well, hello and welcome to my studio. Happy Friday, if it's Friday with you. Today I want to talk about why making things with your hands is so important to your health, to that sense of well-being. And it's something that has kind of been on my mind because I am currently updating my website, and that means that I need to write new copy, and that means I need to think about exactly what it is that I do so that I can explain it really clearly to people who come onto my website. For anybody who hasn't watched one of these before, my name's Jane, and I'm an artist and a teacher, a gardener, a natural dyer. I'm based in the middle of Scotland, very near to Loch Lomond, and I run a website where I support people to rekindle their creativity and reconnect to the natural world. So all of this stuff I was thinking about a lot because we know that, being out in nature and paying attention or making things with your hands are just things that make us feel like us. But how do you explain that? And why would it be? And really, why would anybody pay attention to me? Because I happen to love both of those things. So I have been reading a lot on the subject and also listening to podcasts, and I came across a conversation on the Long Thread podcast, which is a wonderful podcast. And the conversation was with Melanie Fallick, who is, you may well know, but is an American writer who writes about the importance of craft, particularly hands-on craft like knitting and weaving and pottery and wood turning, that kind of thing. The importance of it in somehow connecting with giving people agency over their own lives. And in this podcast, Melanie happens to mention an essay by the writer Ursula Le Guin. Or is it Ursula Le Guin? I never know. Anyway, she's largely a kind of like science fiction writer, but in 1986 she published this essay which is called something like the carrier bag version of history. And it's a very funny essay, and I will link it underneath this. And it's about that age-old thing, how certain bits of history and our understanding have been missed out because they're not, it's kind of like the hero's story, and they're not necessarily dominant male's story. So she talks about going back to kind of prehistory and how our understanding of that tends to be, and I think it used to be worse in the past, I think things are changing gradually, about bringing home the mammoth and creating flint weapons or paring knives and things, because they are the things that have survived. And there's also quite a kind of an exciting narrative to that. You could do the whole, and I went out and this mammoth was chasing and it killed such and such by sitting on it, and but I threw my spear and I brought home the mammoth. But what Ursula Le Guin explains or brings to attention, because it is so obvious, is that the actual useful things in a hunter-gatherer society, which is largely gather, going out and picking the berries or plants, wild oats, the thing that is most useful is a bag or a basket to carry your produce, or your children. So actually, the thing that is our kind of built into our DNA is that making things. And it is maybe making cordage, and it's making nets, it's making baskets, it's doing all of these things. So perhaps that is why making things with our hands, particularly kind of repetitive things with our hands, such as cordage, knitting, sewing, all of these kind of things, how they kind of relax us or rebalance us, recalibrate us. And in the same way as being out in nature and paying attention, which would have been a very essential thing prehistoric times, when you are gathering things and looking out for weather and all of these kind of things. So maybe the making by hand and the being outside and paying attention are connected together and is inseparable, and that is why when we do them, our sense of wellness increases. I don't want to labour it anyway, but I will put underneath here both the links to the podcast, the Long Thread podcast, and a link to read the essay about how all of civilization actually depends on having a bag. So you find me here on this Friday packing up supplies for some sort of supply things that I'm sending out for the Studio Club. Every season in the Studio Club we have a kind of a very vague theme. And over the next 3 months, between now and the end of the year, we are making heirloom patchwork stockings. And I've designed them so that they can be made from old clothes and, things in your scrap bag and that kind of thing. But there are lots of people who either want to follow along with exactly what I'm doing, because that makes it easier, or who want to have the bits that I have here. They maybe don't have a scrap bag, they don't want to cut up any of their old clothes. So I am putting together some kind of supply kits here. I love doing this. So what I tend to do is to use up lots of vintage and plant dyed things. So in this this is the lining fabric at the back, which, I don't know, my mum bought it in the 1970s from a kind of, a bit like a Tupperware party for fabric, and it's still had its label on it from that time, and now I have cut it up to become a lining. It's very nice, kind of open weave, very plain thing. Then I have some linen, which is, there used to be a wonderful mill in Scotland weaving linen, but it closed a couple of years ago, and I was able to buy some bolts just before it closed, so there's some of that. And then there is very subtle plant dyed fabrics. These are largely tray cloths, old bits of linen, things that were so worn that they could never have been reused. And then we have some kind of like vintage braid, some vintage lace that's sort of wonderfully sort of coloured lace. And I'm putting in plant dyed threads. Some of these are plant dyed silks, which were done by Deb, the Mulberry dyer, Debbie Bamford, for me. And some of them will be the threads that I dye here. And then there are kind of bits like buttons and beads. This is the hem bit of a tray cloth. I'm going to finish that as the loop. So that is what I'm going to continue doing today. If you want to know anything more about the Studio Club, it's underneath here in the link. I'd love to have you join us. And there is still time just to get your hands on one of the supply kits. So thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next week, hopefully with a spanking new website to show off. Have a great weekend.